This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios.
Oh, what an attack! What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN, of course, live here in the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. More Flyers hockey tonight after a pathetic performance last night, to say the least. I mean, I know Kevin Durso came on the radio last night. He'll be back on tonight at 6:20. I know Durso told us that the Flyers had flaws in their defensive front, that there were issues with the forwards and defensive assignments. But holy Toledo, what on earth happened? What was that? We got questions. Durso has answers coming up at 6:20 tonight. Of course, the text board is open at 609-403-0973 for you to get on the conversation, 609-403-0973. We are also live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. If you want to watch the show, listen to the show on the digital platforms, also on 97.3 ESPN's mobile app. So no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter what medium you want to use to consume 97.3 ESPN, well, we got you covered. Everywhere, all fronts, every platform imaginable. But before we get to Flyers hockey, and let's be realistic, this Flyers team is in a ridiculous situation after the game last night. We got to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, because the Eagles, let me tell you something. I feel like they are just they're serial dating at this point. They're literally just going out there and saying, does anybody want to talk to us? Would anybody like to have a conversation with us about our head coaching position? Because let's be realistic, that's where we're at. We are now officially up to double digits in terms of this coaching search for the Eagles. That's how bizarre this has gotten. Yes, we are up to now over 10 people who have been rumored for this job. We are at least at 10 who are interviewing for the job. Even more who have been rumored for the job. And my initial reaction to that is, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I know a lot of times in the last several months, myself and others here on 97.3 ESPN have gotten behind these microphones and told you about how Doug Peterson did this wrong, and Howie Roseman and Carson Wentz and Jim Schwartz and this guy and that guy. But for once, I am going to sit here and tell you that the Eagles are actually doing something right for once. For the Philadelphia Eagles, you got to make sure your next head coach, you get it right. You don't want your next head coach to be just another guy. You don't want your next head coach to have the same issues, pitfalls, problems, concerns that you had with previous administrations. Nobody wants to repeat the Ray Rhodes or Chip Kelly eras. Go to the playoffs and everything fall apart from there. Nobody wants an era where it ends like we did with Doug Peterson, where you win a Super Bowl, you go to the playoffs for 3 straight years, and then everything goes downhill faster than a Lamborghini on a 6-second route. You don't want your Philadelphia Eagles next head coach to collapse and crash and burn the way 3 of the 4 head coaches have in the Jeffrey Lurie ownership. So you know what? Interview 10, interview 20. I don't care how many it takes for you to get it right, as long as you get it right. Now, I'm not going to say I'm thrilled with every single name that they've interviewed. I'm not loving the idea that you're interviewing some of these guys, and let's be realistic, maybe I'm not too crazy about them being hired, like Dennis Allen. I think Dennis Allen is a very good defensive coordinator. But I think that his track record tells you that he has a lot of trouble when he's the man in charge. In fact, Allen's been a defensive coach in the NFL for almost 2 decades now. So he's shown you that he can be a very good defensive coach. But man, when you have the difficulty that he had in those 3 years with the Raiders, going 8-28, at least Bill Belichick made the postseason with the Browns. Dennis Allen couldn't even get to 10 wins with the Raiders. So I'm not loving that interview at all. It's not because he's a defensive coach. I don't mind the defensive coach. I'm not one of these people who's obsessed with all offense all day long. Now, that's where me and Jeffrey Lurie differ, because the owner apparently is really fascinated with offensive innovation. And, well, to me, I don't need offensive innovation. I just need my offense to score. And I find that there's a lot of teams in the NFL that find ways to score each Sunday, and they're not exactly the most innovative, and they're all scoring more than the Philadelphia Eagles. In fact, some of them are copycats. Look around the NFL. How many of those teams look like they're running almost the same exact scheme or concepts that the others running? How much of a difference is there really between Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay's offenses? Very minute, microscopic variances. How much of a huge difference is there between what you've seen, for example, from a guy like Kevin Stefanski and what you saw from the Vikings? Oh, that's right, because Stefanski's from the Vikings. Matt Nagy runs a variation of Doug Peterson's offense, which is a variation of Andy Reid's offense, which technically is from the West Coast offense in Bill Walsh. So I don't need my offensive guy to be, as the Eagles have said before, 5 years ahead. No, I don't need the guy who's going to be 5 years ahead. I need the guy who gets the ball in the end zone. So I am not a fan of this idea. I need the greatest offensive mind in the world. But listen, some of these offensive names, they're intriguing. They're interesting. I got to admit, Joe Brady does carry a little bit of interest. He did coach under Sean Payton. What he did at LSU was very impressive. Carolina probably could have done a lot better with considering what you had down there. Some people will say that, maybe they would have done better if Christian McCaffrey was healthy. Maybe, maybe not. But he intrigues me. Josh McDaniels, I'm intrigued. I know that he had a rough couple years in Denver, but let's be realistic. He was probably too young and not mature enough to handle that situation, and he had personnel control. That's why that went sideways. I think he's more mature now. I think that Josh McDaniels, if he takes this job, he's not taking the job to be here for 3 years. He's taking the job to be here long term because, as Mike Gill has mentioned on the Sports Bash, and I agree with this point 100%, I think that McDaniel sees the writing on the wall that he is not the heir apparent in New England anymore. I think that he left the Colts at the wedding altar because of the fact that Belichick and Robert Kraft told him, you're going to be the guy. And they paid him a bunch of extra money to come back to New England. But now, a couple years later, the relationship that you were coaxed back into is not looking so good, because I think the apple of the Patriots' eye right now is Gerard Mayo. So I think McDaniels was a long-term place to be. And I think that he maybe thinks that he could be the next Andy Reid here. I also find Nick Sirianni interesting, because Sirianni is a guy whose coaching background basically is he's coached everything. He has literally been an offensive coach of almost every job on his staff at this point. He's been a quarterback coach. He's been a receiver coach. He's been a offensive quality control assistant. He's done everything at this point. And I think that that guy showed you that he's earned his opportunity to be a head coach. So that does fascinate me. That does intrigue me. Frankly, I'm not sweating too much about Arthur Smith not being here. You could argue that Arthur Smith had a really nice weapon down in Tennessee in Derrick Henry. I'm not jumping up and down about Kellen Moore, that's for sure. Kellen Moore's got to be the least experienced, arguably, of everybody on this list. The guy has been coaching for 3 years. 2 years as an OC and 1 year as a quarterback coach. And before that, he was the Cowboys' backup for 3 years. Even Joe Brady has more NFL experience. He was on Sean Payton's staff for a few years before he went down to LSU. So you could argue that Kellen Moore is the least experienced, and I'm not in love with the idea of a guy that inexperienced around the NFL coming here. And I understand that he left the Boise State job behind the coach in the NFL, but I personally would like to see him get more time as a coach. So that's why as well I'm okay with these defensive guys. Todd Bowles. I'm cool with Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles made the Jets competitive with Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing interceptions in New York. And that was with a dumpster fire general manager situation. Don't forget, the New York Jets are currently on not their first, not their second, not their third, their fourth new GM in the last 10 years. Remember, they went from Mike Tannenbaum to, they have McCagnon. They had the guy, Jeff, oh my goodness, I just forgot his name. The guy with the crazy last name. Now it's going to drive me nuts to look it up. But the point is that they've had 4 different GMs in the last few years. And I'm supposed to believe that was all Todd Bowles' fault? Come on, stop it. I'm willing to give Todd Bowles a chance. I don't think a defensive guy is always a bad thing. I give him a chance. Here it is. John Idzik. Who the heck is John Idzik? All of you guys out there complain about Howie Roseman. Who the heck is John Idzik? 609-403-0973 is the text board to get on the conversation. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, we will be talking Flyers hockey coming up. 6:20 tonight. Flyers, horrible loss yesterday. We'll see what they have going on for them. Of course, we are live as well on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. If you want to consume the show on social media, Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. So you can get in touch with the show with the text board, 609-403-0973, or on the social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Again, that's 973 ESPN on all of those places. So, yeah, I do like some of these coaching candidates. I know some people aren't thrilled with them. I know some people look at some of these candidates and say, I don't know if I want these guys. I don't like these guys. Why are we in last place to get a guy? Well, you went through this in 2016 as well. This won't be the first time you had to wait for a head coaching hire. Being the first turn time doesn't mean anything. Remember, Ben McAdoo and Adam Gase were candidates here. Look how that turned out. You're fortunate that those guys did not become candidates here. That is not what I would have wanted, that's for sure. I mean, literally, Ben McAdoo became a running joke nationally, and Adam Gase is probably the creepiest head coach the NFL has had in the last 10 years. So I'm okay with these 10-plus names. Do I like every name? No. Am I thrilled with every name? No. But do I think they're legitimately qualified? Yes, I do. And again, I wouldn't mind Todd Bowles or Nick Sirianni, Josh McDaniels. I wouldn't mind Joe Brady. I'm not thrilled with the idea of Kellen Moore. I don't care for Dennis Allen. Gerard Mayo, I don't know how to feel about that. I feel like that's almost like a due diligence interview. Deuce Stanley, he's the wild card in all this. We all know that. Deuce Stanley is the wild card in all this. He doesn't get you overly excited. He is not a candidate you dislike. He's kind of just there. Now, whether it's a good or bad thing, time will tell. But I will be interested to see if Deuce Stanley is not the ex-Eagles head coach, and they hire one of these other guys, if Deuce Stanley is on that coaching staff, that would mean that Deuce Stanley has now been a member of 4 different Eagles coaching staffs during his time in Philadelphia as a coach. Man, if that's not job security, money can't buy you anything else, that's for sure. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Of course, we'll get to your text a little bit later this hour. But coming up the other side, ugly loss by the Flyers yesterday. What does that mean going into the game tonight? Well, we'll get into that coming up with Kevin Durso here on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Josh Hennig. You follow me on Twitter at Josh Hennig on Twitter. Of course, you can catch all the game night shows as well in podcast form on the 97.3 ESPN website at 973ESPN.com. And, of course, 97.3 ESPN mobile app where Kevin Durso has his preview for tonight's second half of the Flyers-Buffalo Twin Bill at the center. He joins us next here on 97.3 ESPN FM. And don't forget the free 97.3 ESPN mobile app. You can listen to the Sports Bash, Game Night, and Flyers hockey right on the mobile app, thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Flyers hockey coming up at the top of the hour. Flyers versus Buffalo. How will they respond off of that, well, frankly, pathetic performance they had yesterday at the center? We'll talk with Kevin Durso here live at the center in just a moment. Don't forget about my friends over at weightliftinghq.com. Use code radio10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. Squat and bench racks, kettlebells, dumbbells, cardio and fitness machines, resistance bands, whatever you need to get your health and fitness goals in line with what you want for 2021. Well, weightliftinghq.com is there to help you work out from the comfort of your own home. Again, it's radio 10 at weightliftinghq.com for 10% off your entire order. Joining us right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline, as promised, Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider for 97.3 ESPN.com. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So let's start with coming out of last night. I couldn't help but remember that you were talking to me last night and said, listen, the problem with the defense in this team has less to do with the defensemen than the forwards and defensive accountability. And I think all I saw last night was a lack of defensive accountability because Reinhart had a great night for me in fantasy hockey.
He had a great night for a lot of people in fantasy hockey. Yeah, he was all over the place on that top Buffalo line with Taylor Hall and Jack Eichel, and they just controlled the game, it felt like, from start to finish. It was a bad defensive game across the board for the Flyers. I mean, it wasn't just the six defensemen who definitely had a lot of trouble, but it was a collective defensive nightmare across the board. They just couldn't get out of their own way. The puck management was terrible, and it's one of the areas that Alain Vigneault put an emphasis on as they move forward here. Is that tonight they have to be much better in the way that they maintain control of the puck, that they get out of their zone cleanly, and that it leads to success in the other zones, because the first part of the problem is they couldn't even get out of their own zone cleanly, and that allowed Buffalo to keep applying waves of pressure. So that's why it was such a struggle, because they couldn't get out of their own way in the first place. So that's the goal for tonight, is to come out stronger in that area and build off of that. Build through the defensive zone first, get control, go through the neutral zone, get into the offensive zone, and then maintain that pressure as you go.
Now, when you talk about controlling the zone, for the casual viewer of the game, who maybe is not as deep into it as you are, explain to the audience what are the best ways to control the zone? Because unless you're someone like Hunter Brody who played the game, or someone like you who covers the game as intimately and as intricately as you do, explain to those out there what are the best ways for the Flyers to control the zone, as you call it.
I think one of the best ways to do it is just to maintain control of the puck. And what I mean by that is that in order to get out of your defensive zone cleanly, you either need a really good controlled outlet pass that's right on the money to the next player in line, whether he's in the neutral zone, waiting at the opposing blue line, however you have to get it out of the zone, or skating it directly out while you maintain control. When we look at it in the offensive zone, it's kind of the same thing. Controlled entries are leading a player with a pass and keeping the control from the second that you enter one zone or exit the other. That's what's really the focus, is trying to maintain that control throughout so that you're not chasing the game, you're not getting caught into battles, was another one of the areas that the Flyers didn't look very good in. They weren't winning a lot of battles when it came down to fighting for loose pucks. And that's a big step, too. You have to be willing to go into the dirty areas and win those battles if you're not going to control entry like that and get a controlled entry out of your zone or into the offensive zone. So if you're not going to do those things, then you have to be willing to win the battles to create that space that you need. Because sometimes you can gain a controlled entry and get stood up 5 feet into the offensive zone and the possession ends there, where you can get the puck deep, get into the corners and work hard and actually try to apply that and gain control out of that and start to set yourself up, get your cycle game working, find a way to get the puck to an open area and get a good quality chance on goal and keep traffic near the net so you can maybe pick up a rebound if it's there too. So those are the things that you're looking for, and those are some of the areas where the Flyers haven't been so good to start the season off with. They've scored a lot of goals in those first 2 games, but last night I think we saw what happens when things just aren't working out for them, that they can be held at bay pretty easily if they don't get out of their own way and avoid those unforced errors.
Kevin Durso joining us here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso for all your Flyers and NHL coverage. He is at the center tonight for Flyers versus Buffalo at the top of the hour. You can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Kevin, to me, I want to see the Flyers respond tonight because to me, when you lose a game like that and you got to get right back at it 24 hours later, your response will tell everyone anything they need to know about this team. So how important is it for this team to come out, for a lack of a better term, guns a-blazing when the puck drops at 7?
Well, it's very important, and I think the reason it's so important is because you can turn this into a one-off really quickly if you come out and show your full potential here and play a much better game. If you weren't to play the best game the one night and come right back out, it's just one game, and it's only the 3rd game of the season. And I know it's the Buffalo Sabres, and they weren't a team that made the playoffs last year, but every team in this division is going to be tough. And realistically, what you're trying to do is not make it such a panic situation 3 games into the season. Nobody expected the Flyers to go 56-0. Nobody expected the Flyers to play perfect hockey every single night. And it's about control, like weathering those storms when you do lose a game. And I think the other part of the equation is how bad the loss was the night before as well. It's one thing if they play a close competitive game and lose it on a bad bounce or something like that, and you fall 3-2 or 4-3. You lost 6-1. You got it handed to you. So the response is key because you need to come back strong and show that isn't your true colors in a lot of areas of the game. So that's what I think is most important. And like they all said last night, a lot of them were talking about this, the opportunity to come right back and play again almost immediately to try to get some revenge on this team that really dominated you, to also just put this loss behind you as quickly as possible.
Now, part of your preview right now over at 97.3 ESPN.com, the Flyers projected lines, a lot of shuffling. But the one that stands out to me the most is how different that top line is going to look, because now it's Hayes, Giroux, and Konechny taking the first puck drop tonight, whereas last night you had Morgan Frost out there. Now, I know that wasn't the reason why they lost, but I do find it interesting that you and I talked about this last night, the Flyers don't view lines 1, 2, 3 the same way maybe someone traditionally views lines 1, 2, 3. So what do you think went into some of this line reshuffling that we're going to see tonight?
Well, I think one of the things that went into it was just that nothing was going their way in the first place the night before. So they got through 2 periods down 4-0, and they were looking to try to change their luck in any way possible. And that was just a way to maybe even experiment a little bit too, knowing that the game was probably too far out of reach at that point anyway. So give it a shot, see what else you can do with some of these line combinations and see what sticks. I do think they're still trying to account a little bit for the loss of Sean Couturier, because you're trying to figure out the best combinations to put out there to be that top line when your top line center is clearly out of the lineup for right now. But ultimately, the unfortunate part of this game on Monday night that they lost is it was really not a fair game to evaluate Morgan Frost at all, because when the game is essentially over like that halfway through the game, you're kind of just going through the motions sometimes after that. And it's not really a good game to look at a player and see where he excelled or where he needs to improve or just how his footing was in that first game. Frost looked okay, but it was hard to really pinpoint anybody who looked good in that game. So it's not fair to just try to single him out when everybody collectively needs to improve in this game. So they're going to try to work out some different combinations, maybe see what they can get working for them as they move forward in this game. And it'll be interesting to see if they stick with that for the whole game, if they go back to something that they used last night at the start of the game. Because I know one of the interesting things Alain Vigneault said is he wasn't going to make any lineup changes in terms of who knows, the lines might get shuffled, but the same lineup is going out there tonight because he trusts these guys to be better this time than they were last time. So it's an opportunity for all of them to prove themselves.
Now, when you think about also the line changes, I also am looking at the defensive pairings because, to me, this is one of the more interesting elements of the season. So Niskanen, he's gone. He ain't coming through that door. He ain't coming back. But eventually, Gostisbehere will come back, we believe. So how much of the shuffling that we're seeing these couple games are also a precursor to the fact that we may see even more shuffling when Gostisbehere does come back?
It's certainly possible. And, I think back to toward the end of training camp before Gostisbehere was on the unavailable list, he was getting time with Ivan Provorov, which would be your top pairing. And it would have been an interesting thing to see how that worked out in the game because we know Shane Gostisbehere's game by now. We know he's got offensive ability. We know that at times he's a defensive liability. He's improved in some areas of his game over the years, but he hasn't been close to being a defensive caliber player that somebody like Matt Niskanen was. So you do have to try to figure out the best way to fill that void somehow. And maybe you give a guy like Gostisbehere a shot just to see what he's got, to see him fully healthy now, and hopefully get a chance to prove that he belongs as part of this lineup. But right now you don't have his services available either, so you got to kind of make do with what you have in the lineup. And that's why I think we saw a lot of the shuffling there, too. You saw Travis Sanheim get bumped up to that top pairing with Ivan Provorov in the third period last night. You saw Phil Myers with a different partner as well now. So I think Myers was with Eric Gustafsson for a little while, and then Robert Haig and Justin Braun, which was a big shift because Braun was on your top pairing for the first two periods. And I don't think that was a reflection singularly on him in that game. I think it was just trying to find something that worked out and turn the tide a little bit, but it wasn't going to happen in last night's game. We have to wait and see now if it does make an impact on this game tonight.
Kevin Durso joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso for all your Flyers and AHL coverage. Of course, Flyers versus Buffalo tonight. Tim Saunders, Steve Coates on the call at the top of the hour right here on 97.3 ESPN. And also check out all of Kevin's work covering the Flyers over at 973ESPN.com. And, of course, don't forget about the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Kevin, going through your preview for tonight, we're still obviously watching for the Jake Voracek to get those milestones, but there's another part of your preview article I want to touch on really quick. You mentioned that the Sabres don't figure to make any major changes for tonight after a strong performance last night. So with that being said, how can the Flyers take advantage of a Sabres team that is flying high after a big win yesterday?
Well, they can certainly try to wear them down in a lot of physical areas. The Sabres really earned that win by working hard. So that's a big thing, too, is that they worked really hard in that game and could have used up a lot of energy to get it. I know it doesn't look like that by the final score. When you win 6-1, it looks like it came rather easily. But they were winning a lot of races and a lot of puck battles. So I'm curious to see if they maybe are a step behind because of all the energy put into this game. And if the Flyers can find another gear, because that was the other part of it. The Flyers were just slow and sloppy throughout the game. If they tighten up, if they play a stronger game from start to finish, if they look like they're a faster team, then it certainly should seem that they can find a way to make more things happen in this game. So that's the way you can take advantage of a team that just won. They're flying high, they're feeling really good, and maybe it came a little too easily for them last night, and now you can show them how hard it'll be to play you throughout the year.
Now, after this game, we know the Flyers, they do have a day off. They're back in action again on Thursday. So what is the season looking like right now for this team in terms of how it's going to play out? Because we're going to see a lot of these back-to-backs or playing two games at a time. We got Brian Elliott in goal tonight. What do we expect to see how the Flyers handle the goaltenders moving forward? Because I know Vigneault didn't want to bring Elliott in last night, but he kind of had to protect Carter Hart from himself in some ways.
He did, and I think also it was an opportunity, knowing the game was probably out of reach at that point, to give Brian Elliott some work ahead of this game tonight. I don't see any reason why they really should have changed the plan going into the night like they haven't. They're sticking with Brian Elliott to start this game. And I think it was just a way to get him some ice time because there's not a whole lot of it to go around. You're only going to get to practice so many times. And one of the things we've noticed about the Flyers in their warm-ups is that they're even putting the guys who are going to be scratched for the game into warm-ups because ice time is so hard to come by with practices. So it just gives them a chance to go out there and go through the motions and do a couple of things that they have to do in warm-ups that gets them on the ice for a little bit, just to work out a little bit. So I don't think you're going to see too much out of the ordinary when it comes to the goaltending situation. I think Elliott coming in was a combination of protecting Hart from getting lit up any more than he already was. It was partially to see if that could spark the team at that time because he still had half the game to go at that point. And it was also to get Elliott some work ahead of this game tonight. I don't think it changes much of the plan going forward. I think Carter Hart's still your go-to guy, and I think you'll see him Thursday, no question.
Kevin, one more before I let you go, and that is, if the Flyers win tonight, it's because of what?
It's because they executed better. It's because they managed the puck better. They got more control just by making clean exits and making their passes connect and not turning the puck over. That's the thing they need to clean up the most, is connecting on those passes, getting out of their zone much easier and much cleaner than they have so far, and making things happen once they do get control if they get into the offensive zone like that. Once they do that, then they can really start to try to make some better connections, make some passes that set them up for scoring situations, and that can turn this game around in a hurry. It's what made Buffalo look so good last night, is how quickly they were able to get into the zone, gain control, and then start to set up and do what they wanted to do offensively. That was the result of making good plays and taking advantage of miscues in the Flyers' own end. So if they keep doing those things, if the Flyers can do those things, I should say, then that can turn the game right back around in their favor. It can put them back in the win column. And that's the thing I'm going to be looking to see from them tonight, is that if they can bounce back by doing those things, then I think that they should be able to come out of this game with a win and go on the road feeling pretty good about winning 3 out of 4 to start the season.
He's Kevin Durso. Follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso for all your Flyers and NHL coverage. Check out all of his work over at 97.3 ESPN.com. And as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as we lead you up to Flyers versus Buffalo at the top of the hour right here on 97.3 ESPN, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Kevin, enjoy the game, and from what I understand, you're in a safer spot tonight, so that's good.
Much safer. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Kevin Durso does great work covering the Flyers. Check out all of his preview right now for the Flyers-Sabres. Fourth game of the Flyers, just the fourth game of the Flyers season. We're already talking about goaltenders and line changes and all that kind of wild stuff. And, of course, our Flyers conversation being brought to you by my friends over at weightliftinghq.com. Use code RADIO10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. Weightliftinghq.com is located right here in South Jersey, and they're here to help you reach all of your health and fitness goals. Whether you're someone who wants to work out from home because you can't get out of home because of work or other obligations like family and whatnot, or maybe you're someone who can't get to the gym as much as you would like to, and you want to supplement your workout routine with some equipment at home, they have everything you need at weightliftinghq.com. Benches, squat racks, kettlebells, dumbbells, resistance bands, cardio and fitness machines. They will deliver it right to your home, help you get set up, and you can get started quicker than any other opportunity you can online with ordering with weightliftinghq.com. Use the code RADIO10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. That's RADIO10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. weightliftinghq.com. We'll check out the text board coming up next at 609-403-0973. Of course, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So you can watch the show, consume the content on there as well. You can leave a comment on there. You can leave a comment on the text board at 609-403-0973. We got my FanDuel Sportsbook pick of the night as well as my DFS pick for the night, which worked out pretty well last night. Trey Burke, 17 points, 3 steals. Not a bad night for a DFS shot in the dark. I'll see if I can give you another one tonight as well. Here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, the text board is open at 609-403-0973. You also can comment live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, where we are broadcasting live each and every day here with the Sports Bash with Mike Gill, Hunter Brody from 2 to 6, and then Game Night from 6 to 7 on 97.3 ESPN. So you can catch us on 97.3 ESPN FM. You can catch us on the mobile app, 97.3 ESPN. It's a free mobile app. You can listen to 97.3 anywhere you go in the world. And now you can catch us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Just type in 973 ESPN if you're not already subscribed and following us on all those social media platforms. Thanks again to Kevin Durso for joining the show. Before we get to your comments, over on the text board at 609-403-0973 and on the streams to my right, I want to remind you about my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. I'll give you my DFS and picks for the night in just a moment, but I want to remind you that FanDuel Sportsbook has something that you can't get anywhere else in sports betting, and that's the same game parlays. You can take the money line, the over-under, the spread. You can take any variation of the bets you can make on the games, and you can parlay them into a same game parlay. And FanDuel Sportsbook wants you to get involved in the same game parlay so much that if you're a new user and you sign up with my promo code Hennig, then you can get same game parlay insurance up to $1,000. That's right. If you bet and you're supposed to win up to $1,000, they will protect you on the back end of your bet if you miss out on one leg of a 3 or more leg parlay. So no matter what your same game parlay is, you can't just win big with FanDuel Sportsbook, but they will protect you for your first bet only on the same game parlay insurance on FanDuel Sportsbook. Again, the promo code is Hennig, Hennig, with FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 or to play. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be a resident of PA or New Jersey to play and use the promo code Hennig. All right. So before we get to anything else, I will give you first my DFS play for the night. We're going to go with the basketball again. We gave you Trey Burke last night. Nice game for Trey Burke, by the way. 17 points, a couple steals, a couple assists. I told you, when you get a guy who plays a lot of minutes, that's where you typically want to go when it comes to value, when it comes to DFS. To me, DFS is all about value. Or it's just fantasy sports in general. You want the guys who are getting playing time, right? You want the guys who are going to be out there getting minutes, night in and night out. And to me, that is the biggest deal of all. You want the guys who are getting playing time. And that's why I'm going to point you to the Denver Nuggets. And why am I pointing you to the Denver Nuggets? Because Gary Harris and Michael Porter Jr. are both sidelined. So that means there are other guys who are going to be getting minutes tonight. So no matter what platform, whether you play year-long fantasy or you play DFS, I'm going to give you two guys you want to get in your lineup tonight. That's right. Get him in your lineup tonight. The first guy I'm going to mention to you is a guy named P.J. Dozier. Now, for some of you, you may be like, who the heck is P.J. Dozier? Well, P.J. Dozier is the guy who's playing with Gary Harris out. He has played 27, 22, and 27 minutes in the last 3 games. And while he's not putting up a ton of points, he's filling up the stat sheet. Every one of those games, he has had at least 4 rebounds. Every one of those games, he has had at least 2 assists. So he's getting you some points. He's getting you some rebounds. If you're in a deeper league and you're desperate for somebody, or you're looking for a very cheap option at the end of your DFS lineup, go P.J. Dozier. Also, don't forget about JaMychal Green. JaMychal Green is playing almost the same number of minutes each night as Paul Millsap. So when they take Millsap off the floor, Green is getting a ton of minutes. And he is another stat sheet stuffer. This guy goes out there and rebounds with the best of them. Think about his last 4 games. 8 rebounds, 7 rebounds, 9 rebounds, 6 rebounds. Now, he's only at double digits 2 of the last 4 games in terms of scoring. But he's giving you the rebounds. You're going to want that if you're somebody who's playing DFS because you know how much the rebounds are valuable. So I'm giving you 2 guys tonight, JaMychal Green and P.J. Dozier. They'll give you some value, some depth on your DFS lineups And here's even the better option of all. Remember I told you about the same game parlays with FanDuel Sportsbook? Well, here's a parlay for you, and it has nothing to do with the spread. I told you about Dozier, and I told you about JaMychal Green. You go to the same game parlay section on FanDuel Sportsbook tonight. All right? Here's my idea for you. I just told you about two guys. Look for them on the player props section tonight. Because if you go into the player props section tonight on FanDuel Sportsbook, here's what we got for you over there. I mentioned Dozier and I mentioned Green. Go find them and throw a little something on them. Because like I said, they're both getting playing time tonight. They have to play. There's nobody else to play. Now, of course, they're not big names. You want to stay away from some of these other guys because, they're the big names. Guys like Jokic, guys like Murray, they're going to go out there and do their own thing. They always do. They always will. But here's where you can get the value. Because I told you about Dozier and I told you about Millsap, that's where you want to get the big names. Because Jamal Murray has a nice value play tonight. You know Murray has to keep scoring to help this team go out there and win games, right? Jamal Murray over 23.5 points is plus 146. That's your FanDuel Sportsbook pick for the night. Over 23.5 points plus 146. So there you go. You got your 2 DFS. You got your FanDuel Sportsbook. Don't forget promo code Hennig, Hennig. All right. Back to your messages, 609-403-0973. Let's see here. See if I can do this without destroying the whole stream. There we go. We got Lucio commenting on YouTube earlier. Says, Kellen Moore and Bones are going to be our special teams coach, most likely going to go to Philadelphia with the not-so-thrilled look on his face. Well, first of all, I don't even know if Kellen Moore's going to get the job, Lucio, so I wouldn't sweat too much about the Cowboys losing their offensive coordinator and their special teams coach. I know that Fossil is a guy that's very popular, and there's talk that he actually might interview for the Eagles head coaching job as well. So there might be a possibility, yes, that Kellen Moore could bring him with him. But I would say, Lucio, that I wouldn't worry too much about it just because of the fact that the Eagles have interviewed so many guys. I don't know if Kellen Moore is that high. And there's still a ton of reports out there that Josh McDaniels is the leader in the clubhouse. That has not changed anywhere for any report I've seen from anyone at this point in time. It continues to be consistent that Josh McDaniels is the hot number one guy in the clubhouse. Now, the reason why they haven't hired him yet probably has a lot to do with the fact that the Eagles are trying to be as exhaustive as possible and overturn every stone they possibly can when it comes to this coaching search. So I think you can't overlook that. They're going to interview 10, 12 guys. But I think that Kellen Moore is not the favorite as of right now. So I wouldn't sweat it too much. I'd relax a little bit. I'd take a breath. I'd realize where the Eagles are going. I think Kellen Moore is being interviewed and Fossil is being interviewed because of the fact that at the end of the day, they're just trying to do their due diligence. They don't want to be brash. They don't want to risk it. They don't want to make a abrupt decision. They want to, as I said earlier in the show, you got to avoid the mistakes of the past. You got to avoid the Ray Rhodes and Chip Kelly start out good, fall apart. You won a Super Bowl with Doug Peterson, but then it all fell apart in the last year and a half. Andy Reid, by the end, had lost too many coaches and had too much personnel power and control. You want to avoid those mistakes if you're the Eagles. So, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, to me, I would say Josh McDaniels, I would say Todd Bowles has to be strongly considered as well. I would strongly check back on Joe Brady to see if he can assemble that all-star coaching staff that has been reported on. And I would also strongly look into Sirianni from the Colts, because I think you want coaches who have experience, who have a long enough resume in order to go out there and give you the most value in terms of coaching. Because the problem I have with guys like Kellen Moore and Gerard Mayo is they don't have the experience. And the problem I have with Dennis Allen is that Dennis Allen, I think he's a better coordinator than a head coach. So when it comes to those guys, I'm not interested. As I mentioned earlier, keep an eye on the Deuce Staley situation. He's the wild card. If he's a guy who can walk in there and say, look, here's my coaching staff. I can promise you that I can get these guys here and they will be my coaches. I think that's where the rubber meets the road. I think that's where you can get the most value, because Deuce can give you the coaches. Otherwise, I would go from someone on the outside. I think it's long overdue for them. If they're going to hit the reset button, if they're serious about a reset, this is where you do it and start with the next head coach. I'm Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN and Culture. You can follow me on Twitter at Josh Hennig. I'll be back tomorrow night at 6 p.m. following the Sports Bash with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody. Flyers hockey next.